So you want to get into comic books or back into comic books. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And as you can already tell from the title, in this video I'm going to be talking about how to get into comic books or how to get back into comic books. And I'm going to mostly speak about my own personal experience with going back to the hobby and what it was like, because admittedly it was really overwhelming when I first stepped back into an LCS. Local comic shop, if you don't know. When I first stepped back into an LCS for the first time, and I felt totally lost. Like I didn't know where to go. I didn't remember how things were sorted. I couldn't remember what the difference between what a back issue was. It was just so foreign to me after having taken such a long break. So in this video, I wanted to make something that maybe if you're like me and you're sort of getting back into the hobby and you wanted a little bit of guidance, maybe my personal experience could help you figure out, how to tread some of this comic book water. Because let me just say, it's a great hobby, and if you are new to it or you're wanting to get back into it, it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of joy to be had getting back into it. So first off, I want to talk about if you want to get into comic books, the best thing to think about is, well, what you want out of it. Are you going back into comic books for the collecting? Are you going back into comic books because you just want to read? And if it's the latter, I wanted to talk about how you could potentially get into comic books in reading. There's different ways to do that, namely three. And those three types of reading is basically what you're going to have to decide off the top of what is going to work best for you. The first way to read comic books is going to be, floppy single issues. Generally speaking, that is exactly what you think of when you think of a comic book. Is, all the stuff behind me right here is just a single issue comic book that you can buy to read about your favorite character. The second type of comic book that you can read are what are called trade paperbacks. And those are usually collections of comic books from the single issue runs that have been printed into sort of like a floppy, almost book type of material. So that might be preferable for a lot of people, because one of the nice things about that is, generally speaking, they've collected an entire story arc into those trade paperbacks. And then lastly, the other type of comic book reading that you can do is digital. Now, I personally don't do a lot of digital reading. I like the tactile feel of holding a comic book, but there are certainly a lot of resources out there for people to, read digitally. Comixology is the kind of, I think right now, the #1 website to use for reading comic books. And a lot of people enjoy that. They don't have to clutter their house with a bunch of stuff. I'm sure my wife would love it if I, transition to digital comics. But, for now, I'm a paper kind of guy, and I like to hold on to it. So those are the three types of comic books that you can start reading to get into the hobby. So whatever works for you, there's no wrong way to do it. They certainly have, their different markets, and whatever you prefer to do is going to be what's best for you in order to make the hobby fun. So with that all being said, I wanted to now talk about what it's going to be like for you to step into a comic book shop, and what you're going to see when you step into a comic book shop. Because again, a lot of stimulus, there's a lot to look at, and it's going to be a little bit overwhelming to figure out where to go. So some of the things that you're going to see when you walk into a comic shop. The first one you might see that catches your eye is what I like to call wall comics, or they're going to be known as key issues. Kind of like the stuff that's behind my head right now. These, generally speaking, are going to be comic books that are priced higher, that they're designed for the collector market, the people who want these sort of rare old comic books. And these might be behind the counter on the wall, or depending on what your shop looks like, there might be a glass case that you have to ask the person working there to take a look at them. And typically speaking, these are going to be more rare or more expensive. And if as you start to get back into the hobby and you start to think about what you want to collect, these are going to be the types of things that you're going to see, and eventually these are going to be the type of things that you may want to buy if you get into that sort of part of the hobby. So that's the first thing you're going to have to look at. The second thing that you're going to see is you're probably going to see a rack of new floppy comics, and generally speaking, this is the newest stories that companies like Marvel or DC or Image are putting out. And they're going to be all over racks and walls, and they're going to have that new look. They're going to be generally what's going on in the current storylines. And that's going to be the stuff that I would recommend, pulling from and trying to figure out, okay, as you sort of get back into this hobby, maybe take a look at some of those and read some and then kind of see what you like. Okay, the third thing that you're going to see is you're going to see trade paperbacks. Now, those are the hard book comics, and with those, those are going to be the things that are put into collections and going to have whole stories. And this might be a good way for someone who's new to kind of just pick one, find a character they like, be able to pick it up, read the whole thing, and get a good story out of it. And this is going to be, something that I would also recommend people take a look at when they're getting back into the hobby or maybe discovering the hobby for the first time. And then the last thing that you're going to see, aside from all the, tchotchkes and collectible things like pops and et cetera, but I'm not going to get into that stuff. But the last thing you're going to see are what are going to be called back issues. And back issues are the comics that likely will be in bins or shelves that you can flip through. And those are going to be comic books that are, older, anything, 2 years older and on. And you maybe go, depending on what kind of comic store you're in, they might have stuff that dates all the way back to the Silver Age that you can flip through. And those are going to be the comics that, collectors are going to be looking for these things. The special ones, like I said, are probably going to be, in cases or, on the wall. But there might be a lot of good stuff also in the bins over there. And people flip through these and, they're looking for storylines they want to complete or issues that have eluded them in their collection for a long time. And local comic shops, a lot of them are going to have those. So those are going to be the sort of the fourth thing that you see. Now, if you are getting back into this hobby, I would say that you should stick to either the trade paperbacks or I would say you should read the new floppies or the new storyline single issues. Now, one thing that is good that I think Marvel has been doing for a while is they've been numbering these single issues with legacy numbers. So, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I want to read Spider-Man, but Spider-Man has had over 60 years of storytelling. And one thing that's cool is that in the Amazing Spider-Man run that has spanned since, the early 60s, all of that stuff is in continuity, technically speaking. So that's really cool. It's great that if I read an issue today and I read the first issue from 1960, it's all sort of within continuity of the story. But with that being said, it makes it a little bit hard for readers to kind of feel like they can just jump into the middle of it. Because, if you're like me, I'm a little bit OCD with my, reading and stuff. And I want to feel like I started from the beginning. I don't want to jump into issue number 726 and start reading Spider-Man, because what happened in 725? What happened in 724? What happened in issue 83? I want to know what happened to get there. So luckily, Marvel's been doing a good job sort of numbering their current runs with what they consider are good places to jump in on, or new writers have started to take over the Spider-Man character, so they have a number one issue under this writer, and maybe it's their number one issue, but it's legacy number 710. And that's a good way for people to say, okay, cool. Like, I haven't read, the last 710 issues, but as far as this current run is going on, I can read issue 1. So I have a couple comic books here I wanted to pull up, and here are 2 right now that are currently going on. These are Guardians of the Galaxy. And so you might go into a comic book shop and look onto the wall, and you'll say, hey, that's Guardians of the Galaxy number 1. And, oh, there's Guardians of the Galaxy number 8. If I want to, start reading, I might grab the number 1 issue. And you might say, okay, cool. Well, let me look at the legacy number. And so as you can see there under the fine print, I know it's really fine. It's going to say legacy number 163. So what Marvel's telling you here is this is issue number 1, meaning it's a new writer or it's a new storyline. You can pick it up and start from a place that is generally open to anyone who has no previous knowledge of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But that being said, it is issue number 163 within canon to them as a team. So if you look at number here, you might think, oh, this is issue number 8. So this one must come after this one. But if you look at it, this is actually legacy number 158. So what this is this is a number 8 issue from a run who, the previous writer had when he was working on Guardians of the Galaxy. So when you're approaching these racks and you're looking at like, oh, okay, I want to read Guardians of the Galaxy, that's something that I would say you should take a look at, pay attention to. You'll see in big lettering, you'll see that what number it is within context to that current story. And then you'll also be able to see the legacy number that correlates to it. So you'll know, okay, this number 8 actually is before this number 1, which can be a little bit confusing. Additionally, I want to show you an example here of, here's 2 Spider-Man comics that you can see are within continuity to each other. So this is Spider-Man number 256 from 1984. And this is Spider-Man number 50. So again, you might be like, oh, well, 256 must come after 50. But to emphasize how Marvel has been numbering these things, what they're telling you here is this is number 50 within context to this current writer's rendition of Spider-Man. And in the fine print below it, if you can see in detail, it says legacy number 851. So this is legacy number 256. This one would actually be legacy number 851, even though it is labeled number 50. So a good way for those to sort of, as they look at the new comic books in their single issues, they can sort of determine, okay, this is where we are within, the story, and this is where, this is a good jumping off point. Now, if you want to get into single issues, I would highly recommend that you take a look at some of the characters that that you want to read. So let's say you're a Spider-Man fan or a Guardians of the Galaxy fan. I would recommend that maybe if you want to spend $10 and get 3 different issues, I'd recommend just go look at a character that you like, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, whoever. Go find their current book, see if you can get a number 1 from their issue, or see if you can maybe talk to the store owner or the person working there and ask them, oh, what's a good like kind of jumping off point for a story. And I would just say pick up like a couple of issues from a bunch of different current story runs, and then read them, and then you'll be able to tell, I like this artist, or I like this writer, I like how they tell the story. Because here's the thing. You can definitely be a fan of certain characters, but I think, at least this is true for me, over time, I've actually, become more a fan of certain artists and certain writers that I feel like their writing resonates with me. So I would definitely recommend, instead of, honing in on a character and sticking to that character, I would start to diversify in what you read, pick a few, whatever characters you like. And then after you read them and you see which one's connected with you, really take a look at those writers. Like see, maybe you didn't think that you liked Doctor Strange, but this writer, Mark Waid, was really great on him, and I really liked how he told the story. And I think that that's one of the better ways to continue to find comic books that you're really going to like, is by following writers who write in ways that you enjoy. Now, here's the other thing I wanted to point out is these trade paperbacks. And I have a couple examples here. So these trade paperbacks can look a few different ways. And you're going to have some that look like this, right? So you're going to have these skinny ones. Let's see if I can, a little bit blown out there. But you're going to have these skinny ones. And what these tend to be are, these are going to be, the current single issues turned into a trade paperback. And again, if you don't know, trade paperback just is the comic book, but it kind of looks like a, it's more book material, magazine material, that sort of thing. And, think of these things, the skinny ones like this, as these are like the Blu-ray that comes out after the movie's been launched. So Marvel will do the single issue, and that's the absolute newest story. And then some months down the road, they're going to release a trade paperback that looks like this. And you might not be able to see here, but down at the bottom, it'll say number 1, it'll say number 2, it'll say number 3, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of tell, okay, which order that is. But these right here as trade paperbacks, the skinny ones like this, I highly recommend picking up a couple because one, they're actually cheaper per issue that you would be buying. And they are, generally speaking, a collection of stories or storylines that feel satisfying to read in one sitting. Like you could just read through and feel like you got something out of it. And they're the newest stories. So generally speaking, these are being printed as comics that people have enjoyed. They don't really print the trade paperbacks of the ones that didn't really sell really well or weren't received really well. They mostly stick to printing the ones that the people have liked so far. So this is something to keep an eye out for. Now, you can go a little bit older. You will also see bigger trade paperbacks, kind of like this. These are a little bit thicker. And generally speaking, these are going to be maybe single event storylines, or they're going to be collections of runs that have existed. So for instance, I have this one right here. It's called Uncanny X-Men Marvel Masterworks. And you can see right here on the bottom, the number says 5. So this is a trade paperback that has basically collected all of the issues from the beginning, right? So if I had one that said number 1 here, it would start with X-Men number 1. So if I just wanted to read the story from the beginning, I would look for these types of things where it collects the history of the issue. So you can see on the bottom here, this one says collects X-Men 132 through 140. I know it's fine print, but essentially when you're browsing and when you're looking at stuff, this is what I would pay attention to. So you can say, okay, cool. Like this is collecting this one. Maybe if I can find number 1, I'll start with that. Now, this one is this was an event from Marvel some years back. It was Avengers versus X-Men. And what you're going to see here, there's going to be no indication here that it is, in continuity within terms of like the Avengers storyline or whatever. This is an event, kind of like Infinity Gauntlet is a crossover event, or Secret Invasion, things that you've maybe heard of before as event crossovers. This is something that I would also recommend if you're interested, just picking one up. You can say, oh, cool, this is going to be Avengers versus X-Men. It's going to be a storyline. I might just pick it up and just try it. And if you flip on the back, it'll say collecting issues 0 through 12. So typically speaking, because it's saying 0 through 12, it is insinuating that this is a contained book, contained storyline, crossover event that you can just sort of read and get a sense of what that is. So those are the sort of 2 avenues I would recommend you kind of looking at if you want to sort of get into comic books or get back into comic books. Again, to reiterate, I would say go into the store, determine if you would rather be reading the single issue new comics or the trade paperbacks, and just pick out a couple single issues and try to find that number 1 number so that you know that the storyline is starting from a fresh place, and just see what connects, and then from there, pay attention to who wrote the comic book, and I'd say continue to follow the writers that you really like. Now, if you are getting back into comic books, maybe you're someone like me. I got back into comic books in 2018. And, I went into an LCS and I kind of looked around and I was just like, it was just nostalgia overload. And I was like, oh, I used to have this comic book, or I had this, or whatever. And maybe you even have some of your old comic books and you have like a box that you have in your closet that you haven't looked at in, 15 years or whatever it is. I would recommend that if you want to kind of rediscover what is in your collection, and maybe you want to get a sense like, hey, does any of this have any value? Is any of this worth any stuff? I would recommend visiting these three websites/apps. And here, I'm gonna go over to it now. So here is 3 places I recommend checking out. Number 1 is called Go Collect. And Go Collect is a comic book price guide. But this is a good way to determine, maybe if you have something expensive in your collection, or maybe if you don't have something expensive in your collection. But you can search something. Like, let's pretend I had Amazing Spider-Man 361. This is a classic comic book. I'm sure a lot of people own it. It's the first Carnage. A lot of people, if you're like me and you were born in, the 80s and 90s and you're kind of researching your comic book, this is one that you might have in your collection that has some value. So you can kind of look in here and you can kind of determine, oh, cool. Like, if this is in a really good condition, it could be worth this much money. Granted, this is CGC value, so take it with a grain of salt. You may want to check eBay. The next one I would say to check out is this other one called Comics Price Guide. And this might be a good way for you to sort of look up like more obscure issues that you might have. So I already preloaded it here. Let's say you had some X-Men. Everyone owned X-Men, Jim Lee from the early 90s back in the day. So you might go to a website like this, let it load for a little bit. And then you might scroll down and say, hey, I remember this one, this X-Men #1. I remember having this issue. Everybody owned this issue. And this is a good way for it to for you to determine maybe how much value it might have. So here it says 9.4 near mint, $5 raw, which means the comic book just as is. If you got it graded, encompassed in a casing through an official company like a CGC, maybe it would be worth $10, So again, this is just another way for you to determine what your comic books might be valued at these days. The last one I would recommend, and again, I have no connection to any of these companies. These are just sources that I use and I recommend because they're very helpful, is this is an app. Granted, they have a website here, but it's mostly an iPhone app, and it's called Key Collector Comics. And this is a great way to tell you what some of the values of your comics might be, and also what might be kind of the importance of certain comic books that you might have, or certain back issues. What makes a comic book wall-worthy? So if you can go to here, you can search titles, and let's say I want to look for Spider-Man, right? Everybody has Spider-Man to some degree. And here it's suggesting to me, okay, Amazing Spider-Man. So everyone remembers the Amazing Spider-Man was like the run that, generally speaking, has the most Spider-Man stories. So you can go in here and it'll tell you Amazing Spider-Man #1. If you own this comic book back from 1963, in a high grade, it could be worth $70,000. In a low grade, could be worth $3,000. And it'll tell you here what the significance is. Second appearance of Spider-Man, first meeting of Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, first appearance of this. And so you can kind of look through, and chances are, if you have some comics that Key Collector specifically is pointing out, it might have a little bit of value, and that's kind of cool to find out. So let's take a look at our Carnage issue, right? So Amazing Spider-Man 361, this is in chronological order. So you scroll down, and again, it'll kind of give you a price: low 12, mid 40, high 140, and it'll tell you some things. First full appearance of Carnage, Carnage of Offspring of Venom, yada yada yada. So those are 3 resources that I would say, if you're getting back into comic books and you want a little bit of help, sort of like understanding, how do I find about my old collection, or just trying to get your bearings again within the hobby, those are 3 places that I would sort of go visit and look up the stuff that you got sitting in your box in your closet. So anyways, that's all I got for you today, guys. I hope that was helpful. I know getting back into comics can be super overwhelming, but it's an awesome hobby. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend you go into your local comic book store, and again, you can always just ask the person behind the counter. I mean, I know that you might run into the occasional, Simpsons comic book guy who, just kind of, is a little bit pretentious to the hobby and is not very helpful. But a lot of the comic book people that work in the stores are very helpful, and they're happy to point you in directions and teach you or point you into areas of how to get back in or how to start reading again. And yeah, so anyways, that was my experience speaking from what it was like for me to get back into the hobby and how I had to navigate like what are new trade paperbacks and all this sort of stuff. I hope that was helpful. But let me know what you guys think. Are you new to the hobby again? Are you, getting back into it? Was this video helpful? Please, leave a comment or shoot me a like or subscribe if you enjoyed my content so far. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video.